The Chicago Bears practice squad is set, with a couple of players coming from outside of the organization, and Ryan Poles using the rules to add a little bit more depth that doesn't count against his 53-man roster just yet.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. On the show today, we look at this Bears practice squad that includes a Green Bay Packers wide receiver and a New England Patriots defensive lineman, and Ryan Poles working the rules here a little bit to add guys that will help out this team week one against the Tennessee Titans without having to give them the full 53-man roster spot. As of right now, the Bears don't have a long snapper on the 53-man roster, but they've got a plan for that too, while also getting a pretty good bill of health. We'll go through some injury updates from practice, as the Bears still have a couple weeks to get ready for the Titans, but continue to get mostly good news on the injury front, with one more player leaving practice with an injury, adding back to the list. 2 steps forward, 1 step back for that group. But as the Bears finalized their 53-man roster on Tuesday, Wednesday was the opportunity to put in waiver claims and then sign guys to your practice squad. The Bears were not awarded any players on waivers. One of their former players went to another team on waivers. The tight end Brendan Bates, who was competing for that number 4 spot, and obviously none of the tight ends stuck as a number 4. He was claimed on waivers by the New York Jets. Bates had 6 catches for 100 yards this preseason, seemed to be a decent blocker, an undrafted rookie free agent, gets a chance to be on the actual active roster of the New York Jets. The Bears, no waiver claims awarded to them. They were 9th in the waiver order spot because they were picking 9th in the draft. That's where it spots. So it's possible that there were guys that they put a claim on, but then they were awarded to a team who went before them. But I'm guessing probably not even that. It's possible, but I don't think that's as likely. I mean, the Panthers were before them, and they claimed like 5 or 6 players. The Patriots claimed a few guys. Like some of those teams that were picking earlier in the draft could have claimed a guy the Bears wanted, but they seem to get most of what they wanted taken care of with those trades before the 53-man roster cut down for Daryl Young on the defensive line and Chris Williams on the defensive line to try and fill those spots. And, of course, they added some more players to those spots on the practice squad, bringing in a trio of players who weren't in training camp with the team so far. I think the headliner that jumped out and got our attention was Samori Toure from the Green Bay Packers, a 7th-round pick at wide receiver for them, who was, never one of their top 3 guys the last couple seasons, but always in the mix there a little bit. A guy that they liked in Green Bay, were developing and bringing him along. He did some punt returning for them as well, so there's a little bit of that ability there, some speed, some size there. Like, he can make some plays for sure, and he's purely on the practice squad, so it's not like he's going to get the call up right away and be a contributing player in the short term, but someone who the Bears see some potential in and want to develop him, along with Colin Johnson at wide receiver on the practice squad to start. And then at defensive tackle, the Bears added Sam Roberts of the New England Patriots to their practice squad, and it's been reported right away that the Bears already plan on calling up Sam Roberts for week 1, bringing him to the active roster for that game to add more defensive tackle depth. And that's one of the ways Ryan Poles is working within the rules here to address some of the most vital positions on the roster right now. We know that Zach Pickens is injured, and we'll go through. We got a little bit of an injury update from Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles on Wednesday that we can get not a ton more, but a little bit more progress on who's getting better and who's still working their way back to the team. But with Pickens' status in doubt, the Bears only had 3 healthy defensive tackles on the roster, and rather than use another 53-man roster spot on another defensive tackle, they can just stick with the practice squad, which allows you to elevate 2 players each week from the practice squad to the roster for the game that don't end up counting for your 53-man roster. So Roberts will be one of those guys who they have on the squad still, the practice squad, so he's not getting a full contract, not a full roster spot, but gets elevated on game day to be that 4th defensive tackle if Zach Pickens isn't able to go. The other player the Bears plan on doing that with is with a long snapper who they signed to the practice squad. Not the long snapper who had been in training camp with Patrick Scales, but a different long snapper, Scott Daly from the Detroit Lions. The Bears put their own long snapper, Patrick Scales, on injured reserve. He had back surgery. We'll see. They don't have a great timetable for how long that will be, but Daly's been in the NFL for a little while here, snapped pretty well for the Lions and has been there for a little while, but just got beat out in camp by a better, younger option there, but instantly finds a home with the Bears. He's not super old or anything. He's 30. He's been around the NFL for a little bit. Snapped at Notre Dame, if you're a fan of those teams, but been with the Lions for the last few seasons. Spent some times with the XFL, I think, for a little while as well, but got back in the NFL with the Lions and had been their guy since 2021, really. But moving on to a different name there, a Chicago area native, to kind of keep with Ryan Poles' theme of finding local kids there. So the same thing, though. Patrick Scales is on IR. Instead of using that roster spot for another long snapper, the Bears said, well, we can just call a guy up from the practice squad. We don't have to keep him on our roster. I don't think they're very afraid of a team signing Scott Daly off the practice squad and taking him away from the Bears to be able to call up. So they say, oh, you know what? We can just take advantage of having those extra spots on the practice squad so that when they put Patrick Scales on IR, they brought back the fullback Kari Blasingame, and that filled out your 53-man roster. We talked yesterday about the possibility of, do they put Zach Pickens on injured reserve short term just to free up another roster spot to get a long snapper and a fullback back on the roster? Do they put Ryan Bates on the practice squad because he's been injured at the center position? Put Ryan Bates on injured reserve to free up another roster space there. Neither one of those moves ended up happening, and that's a good sign for both players' injuries, and I do want to talk about the injuries in just a little bit. But first, I want to go through some of the other names and really more so the decisions that went into this Bears practice squad. They had to settle on a quarterback. They didn't put any running backs on there. Some interesting choices on the offensive and defensive lines there. And still, I think between now and even week 1, this Bears practice squad may still change. So I want to kind of go through the surprising decisions and the names we still need to know on this squad from guys who were brought back and who weren't brought back from the initial 90-man roster that had been with this team at training camp. So we'll take a deeper dive into some of the names to know on the practice squad next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our new friends at 5 Hour Energy. I love taking 5 Hour Energy as a great way to pick me up when I'm dragging a little bit or I'm feeling a little bit tired or maybe I just didn't sleep that well the night before and I just need a little something to pick me up. 5 Hour Energy has always been there for me. And I prefer it so much to the big cans of energy drink because those are so sugary and they're full of a bunch of crap and you have to drink a whole thing of it and you get bloated and full of the carbonation stuff. But with 5 Hour Energy, it's a nice little container that I can take quickly. It tastes good and it gives me all the energy I need. 5 Hour Energy is the brand that hardworking people like you and me have trusted for over 20 years to give us the alert, energized feeling that we need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience store, drugstore, and grocery store nationwide. But you can stock up with money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use our promo code, LOCKEDONFB, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and can't be used with other promotions. And the code is not good on subscription orders, but 20% off your multi-pack of 5-Hour Energy. Just use that promo code LOCKEDONFB at 5hourenergy.com. This Bears practice squad has 14 players who were a part of this training camp and preseason roster, plus the 3 players that were brought in as outside free agents that we just talked about. Samori Toure from the Green Bay Packers, the long snapper Scott Daly from the Lions, and the Patriots defensive lineman Sam Roberts. And if you're an astute listener who pays attention to practice squad rules, you might be saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, 14 of their own players plus 3 outside players, that adds up to 17 players. The NFL practice squad only allows you to have 16 players under the expanded rules from a couple of years ago. What gives? How do we get to that many players? And I thought I had this figured out, and then I looked more closely at the rules, and I don't have it figured out the way I thought I did. So 16 is the rule. You're allowed to keep a 17th player if they are granted an exemption from the NFL's International Player Pathway Program. So you may recall during training camp, Torrey Taylor got to count as an extra player. They had 91 on their 90-man roster because Taylor didn't count towards the 90-man roster because the NFL wants to encourage more international players getting into the game. Torrey Taylor comes from Australia, didn't count towards the 90-man roster. Now on the 53, he counts towards the 53. But you can keep one extra practice squad player the same way that doesn't count toward your 16-player practice squad. And so when I first looked at this Bears practice squad, I went and saw, okay, well, the undrafted rookie free agent offensive lineman Theo Benedette, who we got to know on Hard Knocks for his karaoke and his Eagle Speedo that he tore pants off and revealed during his karaoke scene, he is Canadian. He is not from the United States. That's an international player. Perhaps they will get an international player exemption for Theo Benedette to then keep a 17th player on the practice squad. But I double-checked the rules, and Canadians don't count. U.S. and Canadian residents don't count in the international player pipeline. I think any other country, and there's rules about like how long, you can't have done more than like 2 years of school in the U.S., and there's some other restrictions about it, but you got to be born somewhere else and not have spent a minimum or a maximum amount of time in the U.S. for schooling prior to coming to the NFL. But Benedette can't count towards that because he is Canadian. And I'm not aware of any of the other practice squad players being international players that would be eligible for that exemption. And so I think the Bears are going to have to remove someone still from their practice squad. Because the way this works chronologically, on Wednesday, the Bears announced 14 players signed to their practice squad. The 14 guys who were with the team during training camp, Reed, Johnson, Carlson, Curhan, Benedette, Chroma, Mallory, Cowart, Baskerville, Jones, Torrance, Stewart, Moore, Johnson. 14 guys who were here, they announced right away. They have not yet formally announced the wide receiver Samori Toure, the defensive tackle Sam Roberts, and the long snapper Scott Daly, They have not yet announced those players officially yet. It's been reported by Adam Schefter and others that those players will be joining the Bears practice squad, but officially, they still have to come to Hallis Hall and pass a physical before they can be officially assigned to the practice squad. So perhaps Ryan Poles signs 14 of his own, knowing that he's got 3 more guys coming and that he's going to have to get rid of one of those 14. But maybe he tells himself, hey, listen, on the off chance that Toure or Roberts or even Daly fails their physical, that they were dealing with some kind of injury in their respective former team's training camp that the Bears didn't fully know about, or even the player might not have been fully aware of or whatever, and then they fail the physical, the Bears would hate to let that last player have gone to another team, and then the Bears, turns out we do actually have a spot for you, but you already signed on someone else's practice squad, so it's too late to bring them back. Maybe the Bears just said, all right, let's keep these 14 guys that we all really like, and then if all 3 of our outside guys all pass their physicals, we'll pick one of those 14 guys to get rid of and say, sorry, you thought you made the practice squad, but whoops, we found somebody else that we liked better. And when I look at this Bears practice squad as it stands right now, when you count Sam Roberts coming in from the Patriots, He will be the fourth defensive lineman on the Bears' 16-player practice squad. A full 25% of your practice squad is all defensive linemen. I would suspect that when/if Sam Roberts passes his physical as expected, that they will remove one of the other defensive linemen on the practice squad. Particularly if we could bet money on FanDuel Sportsbook for who's going to get cut off this practice squad, I would put my money on Deshaun Mallory, the undrafted rookie defensive tackle, because they already have defensive tackle Byron Cowart, who is really the number 4 guy throughout the entire preseason. And then the last one is Jamari Croma at defensive end. And I think they want to keep at least one defensive end and then a couple of defensive tackles. But right now it would be 3 defensive tackles and 1 defensive end if they keep all of them when Sam Roberts passes his physical. It just seems like the natural spot where you might remove someone else from that practice squad to say, yeah, okay, we kept an extra defensive tackle because we really need to make sure we've got depth there, but once we get this new guy in, all right, sorry, Mallory, you were kind of the last one included in this list anyway, so we're going to move on and keep the new guy. Once he's in here, then you'll actually be down to 16 and fit the proper number of practice squad players. As we look at this full squad, a couple of other rule things to note, that on the practice squad now, you can keep veteran players, but you can only keep 6 players that have more than 2 years of experience in the NFL. 10 of your guys have to have 2 or fewer years of experience in the NFL, and then you can keep 6 who are more experienced veteran players. So your 6 veteran players, once these moves all go through, will be the wide receiver from the Packers, Samori Toure, the tight end, Steven Carlson, the offensive tackle, Jake Curhan, the long snapper, Scott Daly, the defensive tackle, Cowart, and then the safety Tavarius Moore, because technically Roberts is in his second season from the New England Patriots. And so those would be your 6 veterans. The other 10 are all younger players in the mix there. It stands out to me a couple of different things. One, that they chose undrafted rookie quarterback Austin Reed instead of veteran quarterback Brett Rippon on the practice squad. They like Reed. Matt Eberflus spoke highly of him on Wednesday and explained a little bit of like, yeah, we like the way he worked and the way he performed, and we believe in him and want to keep trying to develop him. So that's why he's on this practice squad. I'm surprised there is not a running back on the practice squad, but I suppose when you have 4 running backs on the roster plus Velus Jones, who's kind of your 5th running back in here, you know, with him and Travis Homer and then the big 3 at the top, the Bears said maybe they just said, all right, we've got 5 guys there. We really don't need to keep a practice squad running back because Ian Wheeler is already on injured reserve anyway, so we'll keep him around in that regard. The Bears wanted to keep tight end Brandon Bates on the practice squad, as we mentioned earlier, claimed by the Jets on waivers, so I think that's how Carlson gets onto the squad instead, but I think it would have been Bates had the Jets not come in and scooped him up. The Bears only keep 2 offensive linemen on the squad, tackle Jake Curhan and guard Theo Benedette. I would imagine without a center on the practice squad, the Bears envision, I'm guessing, Doug Kramer will return to the practice squad once Ryan Bates is fully healthy. For now, Kramer's on the 53. The Bears have 3 centers on the 53-man roster. When Bates is fully healthy, ready to go, no question, good to go, I believe they will release Doug Kramer, keep 2 centers on the roster, and then put Doug Kramer back on the practice squad, giving them a 3rd offensive lineman on the squad and an actually like true center on the practice squad at that point. Those were kind of the big standouts to me. Everything else, yeah, they kept a couple linebackers, they kept a couple corners, they kept a couple safeties. Like, I thought they might go out and bring in more guys from outside of the organization, but the fact that there are 14 here and probably going to be 13 in reality when they hit week 1 of guys that were here that they wanted to keep around on their practice squad speaks to the kind of depth and development that Ryan Poles has been able to build here, where they really do like a lot of the guys they couldn't cut. And it's not like they're turning that over, trying to find better options to develop. It's like, no, even the 3rd and 4th string guys, they feel like have some real talent that's worth keeping around and trying to build up into something that can contribute in the future or maybe even later this season in case of injuries on a practice squad call-up. The good news is the injuries are getting better for the Bears, and they still have time to get ready for week 1. They did get a little bit, they did have 1 player leave practice on Wednesday with an injury that could be concerning, but a couple of guys are making more progress getting their ways back. So we'll get a little bit of an injury update and how that will shape the team's decisions for week 1 next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime. the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I have the Gametime app downloaded on my phone, and I use it all the time. I've got tickets to go see Avril Lavigne with my girlfriend coming up here in a couple of weeks that we're really excited about, that we got on Gametime, because with Gametime, we can see the view from the seats that we're buying. So we know exactly where we're going to be sitting in that venue, and we also know exactly how much we're paying, because Gametime has all-in pricing that has all the fees built in. So you don't get any of those big price increases when you get to the checkout and realize these tickets cost way more than you thought they would. So whether it's concerts, comedy shows, theater shows, I went to a couple Bears games on the Gametime app last season as well. They've got you covered. If you want tickets, it is the place to go. It's the best way to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Game time. The Bears are still practicing in these few weeks before week one. It's not really training camp because you're down to 53-man roster, but it's an extension of that, where you get a chance to keep working through the stuff that you were working through during the preseason. There will be a break in there as well, but they practiced on Wednesday and still have, I think, a couple more practices before they get the break. And then game week before the Titans is a normal week of practice for preparation for that game. And so at Wednesday's practice, we got a little bit more of an injury update in a couple of key areas. So let's start with the guys who didn't practice. Keenan Allen at wide receiver was one that right away grabs your attention. Wait a minute, Keenan Allen didn't practice. He hasn't been hurt this preseason, at least as far as we've been able to tell. What's going on there? Matt, I don't know if it was Eberflus or Poles. I think Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles said Keenan Allen had an issue with his cleats and was dealing with some discomfort in his foot. So he'll be fine, but he was on the bike for practice and just kind of doing conditioning stuff that way. But evidently, I don't know what kind of cleat issue would be serious enough to cause enough discomfort to keep him out of practice, but obviously very precautionary. Keenan Allen doesn't need to be out there. He'll be good to go for week one, but it's hard to envision what kind of cleat issue, unless you screw in the spike too far and it goes into your foot. I know that's not literally possible, but is it squeezing your foot too tight and you get some, I don't know what that could be, but nothing for the Bears to be concerned about. The one that's still lingering the most, Zach Pickens. DNP at practice on Wednesday. Hasn't practiced in a little while. It's why they're planning on calling Sam Roberts up to the 53-man roster for this game. It's part of why they traded for Chris Williams. The defensive tackle spot is the one where injuries, I think, are still going to play the biggest role entering week one. I'm not expecting Pickens to play, but Matt Eberflus was talked on was that Tuesday or Wednesday? Now, the days are running together with me this summer. It's a problem. But Matt Eberflus was asked, are there any guys on your roster that you don't think are going to be ready for week one? And his quote was, it doesn't look like it right now, but we'll see. So there is some optimism that Zach Pickens could play week one, but the Bears are clearly preparing via Sam Roberts and Chris Williams. They're preparing for the possibility that Pickens can't go, or that if he can go, he won't be 100%, so you're going to need extra depth on the defensive tackle position either way. So no Pickens, that's more serious. No Allen at practice, that's less serious at this stage. But that means your injured center, Ryan Bates, back at practice. It was my understanding it wasn't a full team practice participation for him, but was limited and participating in some one-on-ones and some other stuff on the side. So clearly a step forward and making some progress there. And if he's practicing on a limited basis on August 28th, he will be good to go barring a setback, I suppose, but it means he's really, on track to go for the Bears when they take the field week one against the Tennessee Titans on September 8th. It's plenty of time, and that's another week and a half here for this team to really get him back to 100%. And then Kevin Byard, the free safety, the veteran, he had been injured, and he was back at practice participating pretty close to full as well. So the Bears feeling pretty good about their health. All the starters back in there in the mix, most of the top backups minus Zach Pickens back at least to a limited capacity. But then during practice on Wednesday, one player left with the trainers and did not return, dealing with an injury situation, and that was backup guard Bill Murray, which of all the players on the roster to go down with an injury, perhaps the most affordable, the backup guard, not either of the starters, not someone who you would hope in week one, Bill Murray has no reason to take the field because your starting 5 offensive linemen are healthy and they play the entirety of the game. So like if there's the most expendable player on the roster might be Bill Murray in terms of who can get hurt because Matt Pryor can play backup guard or backup tackle. Like I don't mean to like downplay Bill Murray, who had a really strong preseason and training camp in order to make this 53-man roster ahead of Ja'Tari Carter, who was cut and ended up on the Carolina Panthers practice squad. Bears kept Theo Benedict on their squad instead of him, and he went to Carolina instead, which was interesting. But still, Bill Murray is a backup guard. And if that's the worst of your injury concerns on a Wednesday, I will absolutely take that. Still, Pickens is probably the bigger one, but like if Murray has to miss a little bit of time, the Bears can find other backup guards. They have guys they like. They could always sign Ja'Tari Carter off of the Panthers practice squad if they really need to. So all things considered, good bill of health moving forward in the right direction and still have plenty of time for those guys to keep getting healthier. And as Eberflus said, it doesn't look like it right now, for now, that any of those guys will miss week one, but I just don't suspect Zach Pickens will be 100% and may not even, it may just keep him out for precautionary reasons. If you got other defensive tackles, you're going to call up from that practice squad. I think at this point then, the dust will mostly be settled on this Bears roster. Again, like we talked about, like it seems like they still have to cut one more practice squad player to make room for the 3 veterans, but that feels like it should be the only transaction between now and week one when they call up 2 players off the practice squad, but that's not, I don't know if that counts as a transaction. You're not bringing in someone new or losing anybody you didn't have, but like in theory, this Bears roster should now be pretty much set for week one. So this is the team that's going to play the Tennessee Titans and should, win that game. I mean, we'll preview that game. We'll have our crossover. We'll have our crossover with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans before that game. We'll have a lot of time to dig into Tennessee, but this is the roster. So now is the time to certainly get to know them and get familiar with what the Bears are working with this season. Assuming there isn't another big roster change coming over the next couple of days, we still have to go back and recap Tuesday's episode of Hard Knocks. I know it's going to feel late and old a little bit at that time, but like these roster moves are more important and more relevant to the team. But we did get episode 4 of Hard Knocks that, I don't know, I thought it got to some of the like better emotional stuff, but also reminded us of a lack of overall drama and like interesting other storylines that the Bears have had to deal with this season. So I want to go through some of the things we learned from that episode. And I think we'll still get one more with Cut Down Day included on it next week on Tuesday. And we'll have to do sort of like a big this season of Hard Knocks recap. We maybe hope to talk to Larry Dyer from Bears Talk Underground about that. We've been talking about getting together for a really like just a Hard Knocks deep dive session here over the course of the full season. So that's why you have to hit that subscribe button. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app, subscribing is the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, why don't you check out Locked On Fantasy Football? Because we're your team every day. That includes your fantasy football team, where you can get daily insight on the best fantasy draft strategies, waiver wire pickups, and of course, lineup decisions all season long. Find Locked On Fantasy Football wherever you found this Locked On Bears podcast. But then you got to make sure you come back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.